Yeah, there's nothing wrong with empirical sense data. It's just not that all knowledge comes from sense data. If my experience is a projection of my mind, then I can't know that that's objectively true.
Okay, maybe I'm just making
Accidentally getting the right position still doesn't get you to justification for the position. The content of the proposition is also not in sense data. Where in sense data do you see the content or the truth value of that proposition? And if it's not reducible to sense data, then it's still defeated.
How would you, like, ultimately on the fundamental level, how would you, justify the existence of, other sentient beings, right?
Well, because the Orthodox worldview believes in and posits the reality of other sentient beings, and my senses confirm that.
Right. So basically, you accept the Orthodox paradigm, and therefore, sentient beings are, viable, or they're allowed.
Well, I also said that that conforms to my sense data experience as well. So it wasn't one thing; it was two things.
Right. So it's a mix of both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with empirical sense data. It's just not that all knowledge comes from sense data.
Right, so there's the addition of divine revelation, or the church in general.
Well, and there's other arguments from reason, other arguments from logic, arguments from universals. So those are not empirical sense data arguments. Those are rational, abstract, conceptual types of arguments too, that are not necessarily revelation.
Right, yeah, makes sense. But I also wanted to touch on the argument before that I've heard you make, that solipsism is self-refuting, but I don't really get that. And I'm kind of a slow boy, so I'm not not trying to be argumentative.
Yeah, it doesn't. So if my experience is a projection of my mind, then I can't know that that's objectively true without some measure of truth that's beyond my mind, or some standard that's beyond just my projection. But I can't know that by definition if everything is a projection. So in other words, it's like the illusion worldview. If everything in my experience is an illusion, then my coming to know that truth is also an illusion, and it's self-refuting. So the point is that you can't justify the knowledge that you would have in a solipsistic worldview. And so the solipsistic worldview itself can't be known for sure. In other words, it's a defeater for the possibility of having real, justified, true knowledge.
Yeah, but my rebuttal to that would be, you could still accidentally arrive at a true belief, such as, for example,
but if it's accidental, it's not justified. That's the point. That's one of the reasons why the Dyer problem exists, because you could accidentally arrive at a true belief. And the Dyer problem points out that that's another defeater for justification.
Yeah, but I don't see how it necessarily refutes solipsism. I mean, for example, if you're playing a video game, or
do you know what the Dyer problem is?
Yeah, I've heard you bring it up before, but
so it shows that it's not justified. If your knowledge isn't justified, then it's not true knowledge.
Okay, but wait, can I give you an example? So if you're playing a video game and someone, like a character, an NPC, breaks the fourth wall, does that therefore invalidate the fact that they're, an NPC, they're not real?
I don't understand how that analogy relates to the Dyer problem.
Okay, maybe I'm just making...
Accidentally getting the right position still doesn't get you to justification for the position.
Yeah, I get that.
Well, if you get that, then it's not justified true belief. So it doesn't work for a theory of knowledge. It's a defeater for knowledge if you get that.
Yeah, but couldn't you just be an epistemic nihilist and
epistemic nihilism is the surrendering of the possibility of epistemic justification. So you could go that route, but that means you can no longer debate and you can no longer justify knowledge. So yeah, exactly. Thank you for those questions. They're good ones.
I had a question about the critique that you make against empiricism, where you tell them the knowledge claim itself is not found in empiricism. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, what if they try to get around that objection by saying it's not that the claim itself has to be an empiricism, but the knowledge in order to make the claim is an empiricism? How would you refute that?
Well, the content of the proposition is also not in sense data. Where in sense data do you see the content or the truth value of that proposition? And if it's not reducible to sense data, then it's still a defeater.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying, but what if they try
So in other
to,
words,
like,
I could write the sentence out on a piece of paper, and yes, the piece of paper is in sense data, but that's not the truth value or the meaning content of the proposition, which is not in the paper. It's not in the pen. It's not in the molecules. Where is it? What is it? That's the point.
I think to be a bit more specific, I was asking, like, what if they say, well, the language that we learn is in sense data, and using that knowledge about language, we are able to make the sentence. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's bypassing the question, which is where is the meaning or the content of the proposition? Because it's not in the
you mean like the
it's not
actual
identical
words
to
themselves?
it's not identical to the paper. It's not identical to the pen. So what is it? Where is it?
Okay, I think I understand.
Yeah, you
Can I
can't
ask-
reduce that to the sense data.
I feel like tag kind of undermines the like science in general, and even as like an Orthodox Christian, like at what point, what criteria are we saying like, oh, we can use science and use evidence? Because where does that align with orthodoxy?
No, I would argue that in fact you couldn't have science without the transcendental categories. So it really has nothing to do with undermining science. Why would it undermine science? I mean, evidences are absolutely necessary. It just depends on what type of thing is being debated or what the question is. So, for example, if somebody came to the debate and said, "Oh, there's no historical evidence for the person called Jesus of Nazareth," right? A lot of atheists say this. Well, this is the perfect time to bring in historical evidences and say, that is actually totally not true. Here's this evidence, here's this evidence, here's this evidence, here's this evidence. So in that case, it's absolutely necessary to bring in historians, testimonies, evidences, proofs, quotes. But if it's a debate about something that's prior to evidences like worldviews or paradigms, it's not going to work to just put forward evidences. You're going to have to deal with something at a paradigm level, like transcendental categories, preconditions.
But when you debate a Catholic and you're saying that they're an evidentialist, but they're also not only an evidentialist, they also have faith. So where does that stand?
Fideism and evidentialism actually go together. So I'm not sure what you mean by they're evidentialists and they have faith. Evidentialism is a school of apologetics that believes that you just, quote, prove something by piling up a bunch of evidences, and if you get enough of those stacked up, maybe they'll choose in the right direction. But evidentialism relies on a certain type of epistemology, classical foundationalism usually, and it relies on other things that are not proven or demonstrable, like that everything is theory neutral. So evidentialism is an assumption in epistemology and in classical foundationalism that I'm calling into question. That doesn't really have anything to do with Catholics saying that they believe something, quote, on faith. In fact, that's kind of a fideistic move, typically, which actually makes sense with evidentialism.
Yeah, but my question arises with orthodoxy when they put an emphasis on mystery and mysticism. How does that not contradict with evidence, and how can we use evidence?
Well, I mean, apologetics and this kind of stuff only goes so far. It's just a sign pointer. It's not the essence of the faith. The essence of the faith is you directly experiencing God in the mysteries, namely the Orthodox liturgy. So mysteries doesn't mean like some sort of Gnostic unknowable thing. In the Orthodox sense, the mysteries are the things that are revealed.
Revealed like divine revelation, you mean?
Yeah.
I had an atheist say like divine revelation. What about like when you see like evolution and you see the different evidence they give for evolution? Like at what point do we say, like when we're looking at different evidences like that where we see science, at what point do we say, okay, do we pick divine revelation or do we see this evidence?
Right. Well, that's what I'm getting at with paradigms, which is that there's no, quote, evidences that are self-interpreting or that don't come with some kind of network of things to interpret it through. So there's no such thing as like a bunch of evidences that just necessarily prove evolution. because you're still interpreting the evidences. And in philosophy, for example, there's a problem called the underdetermination of data thesis. And what this is dealing with is the fact that you can have a bunch of evidences that can equally be explained by rival theories or paradigms. So just having a lot of evidences will not tell you which theory or which paradigm is correct, because both of them potentially can explain the same data. So that's why evidences just from the underdetermination of data thesis problem are not enough to sway you at a paradigm level question. And I would argue that maybe even evolutionary theory is actually a paradigm level. I mean, I know that most evolutionary theory proponents think that they're just going with, quote, the data and the evidences and the science papers and the science men. But if you really dig into it, it's actually a grand narrative that goes way out of the scope of sense data. And it's a vast metaphysical religion in reality that is a paradigm level commitment, in my view.
Okay, that makes complete sense. But I guess my question or my struggle arises when you have scientific data that kind of rubs against the Bible, and at what point do we say, like, oh, science is wrong or the Bible is right?
Again, I think it just have to be a case-by-case basis. I mean, in my view, philosophy, this is where I would be out of accord with probably most people in modernity. In my view, information and theories and things that come from the scientific realm, I'm not opposed to them. It's just that in my paradigm, I'm way more skeptical about those things than I am about philosophy. And that's the reverse of most people. Most people in the modern world are way more, in my view, dubiously certain about scientific claims and theories, and they're way less certain and don't know anything about philosophy. So I have a totally different inverted paradigm from the way most people think. So when I hear supposed accounts of, oh, this paper has come out and it supposedly refutes this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, I really don't put a whole lot of stock in science papers, because I just remind people that the most important science journal in the world in terms of medicine, The Lancet, about 6 or 7 years ago said half of the science papers in the world are fraudulent. So if that's true, and if I'm supposed to believe the authorities of the peer-reviewed domain, and the peer-reviewed domain authorities tell me that half the science papers in the world are fraudulent, then how am I supposed to believe the peer-reviewed papers that tell me blah, 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 blah? You see, it's a crisis of science papers, and literally that's what The Lancet says. It's a crisis of science papers.